Welcome everybody, today I will show you the best legendary gear warrior build, if not the best legendary build at all. You don't have to grind for any epic weapon or gear, you can turn on your game and make this set right now. It will deal 12 million damage with warrior abilities and even 4 million damage as a hunter and as an assassin. You can almost call it the ultimate legendary hybrid build. Of course it has also 100% crit chance, so stay tuned and watch this video. Please also don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment and maybe you even want to join our Discord server. This complete legendary gear set will deal 700,000 with a light attack, up to 1 million with a heavy attack, of course it depends if you attack from behind or not, and up to 3 million with a charged heavy attack. For a Ring of Chaos you will have around 1.3 to 1.6 million damage, and the combined attack damage for Fury of the Bloodline will be 4 million, which is enough to kill a mercenary in a single strike. And the overpower damage will be around 10 to 12 million in total, which is absolutely amazing for a legendary build. Because this set has so many fire damage, even if we only have 50% hunter damage, the 155% fire damage make up for a good hunter set as well. You deal up to 1 million damage with the ghost arrows of Artemis, which also pierce shields, so you don't even need an engraving for that. You will have 1.6 million damage with the devastating shot, and even better than devastating shot is the predator shot, which deals around 2 million damage on a single target with a headshot. But the best bow shot of all is now the overpower bow shot, which has 4 million damage. It is now completely able to crit and deal all the damage to one target and even the surrounding targets. Everybody will get 4 million damage even with a non-hunter build. And I also tested the Reign of Artemis, which will deal 1.5 million damage. As you can see, we can kill a whole leader group with all these elite soldiers. That is no problem, so it's also absolutely amazing. Not to forget the critical assassination, which is also able to kill a mercenary in a single strike on Nightmare. In our gear we have 22,000 hunter damage, 75,000 warrior damage and around 210,000 assassin damage. That is pretty good for a legendary build. Please keep in mind we do not use the Blade of Yumminess because we want to have abilities. Only with abilities we are able to get over 10 million damage. With the Blade of Yumminess you will be stuck at around 3 or 4 million no matter what you do. So this is a fully ability enabled build which uses the best legendary weapons and gear you have in the game. I choose to make a sword build because only swords and daggers are able to deal all their overpower damage to a single target, which really helps us with the creatures, the minotaur and whatever. And swords are the second fastest weapon, but they deal the double amount of damage per single hit than daggers. So I wanted to go with a sword build. Of course you can also use different legendary weapons here if you feel more comfortable with them, but the overpower attack will be very different for all other weapon types and will deal less damage. In order to understand why I picked these specific gear and weapons and what engravings I choose, I will give you a short explanation of how the warrior damage calculation works. I've done that in my 18 million epic warrior build already, but in that calculation there was a mistake. So I will show you the corrected version now. The warrior damage consists of two different parts. The first part is your base damage when you have no weapon equipped, which is either 2490 for the left hand or 2470 for the right hand. On top of that you have to add the weapon DPS, which is 8257 in that case here. So we have 10,747 as our base warrior damage. This is our first 100% warrior damage. We always have these first 100% warrior damage. This warrior damage is then increased by warrior damage perks, so every 20% will add 20% on top of that. But there's another part of the warrior damage, which is the elemental. And here on the right side you see that the elemental also uses 10,747 as a base value. But elemental does not start at 100%, the elemental damage starts at 0%. So you will not have any elemental damage at all at the beginning. Your elemental perks, 40% fire, 40% poison, will add 40% of 10,747 to your damage output. So now you might think we have the same base value, 10,747. If I add 20% on warrior, that's far less than when I add 40% on the elemental part. But that's not correct, because there's another factor, the weapon factor. The weapon factor only applies to the left side, and it multiplies only your warrior damage, and it acts as a real multiplier. So if you have 140% sword damage, for example, it multiplies 20% warrior damage with a factor of 2.4, so that you have 48% warrior damage when you have a maximum sword weapon factor. So the weapon factor, damage with swords, damage with heavy blades, damage with blunts, etc., amplifies your warrior side, and at a certain point, at 100% weapon damage, it makes it even stronger than elemental. So in any build that has below 100% weapon damage, damage with swords, daggers, etc., you have to go for more elemental damage, because then elemental is stronger. But if your weapon damage is over 100%, you have to go for warrior damage, because then your warrior damage is stronger than the elemental. And of course the overall strongest damage output will be when you have the maximum weapon factor and the maximum warrior damage. So that's why in my epic build with the 18 million, I focus a lot on warrior damage alone, because the warrior damage is then the best at all. Because this build has a lower than 100% weapon damage factor, we will focus more on the elemental part wherever it is possible. So after applying the weapon damage factor, your damage output gets added together, and then the crit factor is applied. So all the damage is multiplied by critical damage. And then everything is multiplied again by abilities and by armor penetration. Armor penetration is really useful. It is one of the most useful perks here. It has to be used in any good hunter or warrior build. It reduces the enemy armor by 30%, makes it around a 1.3 multiplier on top of everything else. So when we apply these calculations to our engraving ranking for this specific set with these specific stats, then we will see that the weapon damage is even better than 100% crit. It will give us more damage than 100% crit damage increase, and even more damage than 50% crit damage increase. Then next is 40% fire, because we do not have a high weapon damage factor. One reason is that weapon damage becomes more valuable because we have less weapon damage. That makes it more valuable to increase, and having less than 100% weapon damage also increases fire damage. So fire damage in this case is more powerful than a warrior damage increase, because warrior damage gets not enough amplified to surpass fire damage or poison damage. So after fire damage we have warrior damage, and then the last engraving would be all damage. But we also have to focus that we have 100% crit chance. So we have to make sure 100% crit chance first, and then any of these engravings. With all this in mind, I picked then the two best legendary swords which I found. The first one is the Prometheus Seeker, which has warrior damage, fire damage, another 15% fire damage and build up. I don't care about the build up, but 15% fire damage is nice. And then we will engrave 30% damage with swords, because damage with swords is amplifying the whole warrior damage we have, and we are missing it on a lot of legendary items. Sadly, there's not a single legendary perfect sword in the game. A perfect sword would have warrior damage, damage with sword, and critical damage. So both of our legendary swords do not have critical damage, but we will replace it with a lot of fire damage stuff. The other sword we use is the Sword of Kings, which has warrior damage, all damage, melee charging speed, which is really nice, and we will engrave it with another 30% damage with swords. Then in total you will have 90% damage with swords when you have another 30% from the mastery points, and that is the maximum you will achieve with this legendary build. But also I would recommend that you engrave on the Prometheus Seeker instead of the damage with swords the permanent fire damage engraving, because we have 155% fire damage, and when you engrave the fire damage perk here, you will automatically have 155% fire damage always applied to your sword. So that is 1.5 times the amount from the 100% Falx of Olympus. We get 155% damage always applied to our weapon instead of the 100% from Falx of Olympus. I've also done a lot of testing with the permanent fire especially with this build, and I found it really more useful when you have permanent fire active on your weapon instead of activating it, because it always makes a loud noise and every enemy is turning around, engage you, and you won't be able to play stealthy. And when you ride on a horse, you are not able to activate your ability. So when you are on a horse, you won't have the fire damage on your weapon. And that is especially useful because when riding on a horse, you have a 2 times multiplier on your damage. So you lose on 2 times the amount of fire damage in fact when you don't activate it. Also, if you are fine with activating it every time, then I've shown you that the damage with swords would be the best option to engrave, but I definitely prefer to have permanent fire damage on it. You may also ask yourself why I'm not using 100% damage increase from the Falx of Olympus perk here on the other sword. That's simple, because 30% damage with swords increases our warrior damage by 30%. So 30% from 270 is 90%, around 90%. And I get 90% by using 30% damage with swords instead of 100%, but I don't lose any of my health. When you exchange damage with swords with the Falx of Olympus trait, you will have 1000 damage more on your inventory screen. So it really does not make a difference when you have 30% damage with swords or the Falx of Olympus here. It makes a difference of 1000. It will be 65,000 damage instead of 63.6. As our bow we pick the Hades bow, which is simply put the best warrior bow in the game. It has warrior damage, another 40% fire damage. As we learned, it also increases our warrior base damage by 40%, so that is absolutely amazing. The bow also converts normal arrows into fire arrows, so we don't have to worry about that. And we will engrave armor penetration on the bow, which is the most powerful perk for hunter and warrior you can engrave. It is even more powerful than 100% from Falx of Olympus in most cases. For the armor I use the complete Nemean Lion set, which is simply put the best legendary set in the game. It has the maximum crit chance and the maximum critical damage you can achieve in the game, and that as a legendary set, which makes it really unique. Normally you will only be able to get these stats with epic gear, but the Nemean Lion set is the only set which maximizes crit chance and crit damage at the same time. You have to understand that epic sets have 4 engravings on every gear piece, whereas legendary have only 3 engravings on every gear piece. And that's a big difference, but the Nemean Lion set is good in making up that gap. This legendary set has also not a single wasted engraving, so there's no adrenaline stuff in it, there's no damage to Spartans or Athenians on it. It is really perfect, it uses only the engravings you really want to have. And on top of that, it has a set bonus that is not only worth a single engraving, it is worth 2 engravings. You get a set bonus of 10% crit chance and 50% crit damage. So that is worth 2 normal engravings on an epic gear. So compared to any other legendary set, you lose only 3 engraving compared to an epic, instead of 4 or 5 engravings compared to another legendary set. Sadly, we are not able to engrave damage with swords on the headgear because we have to engrave 20% crit chance while full health to complement the 100% crit chance on this set. The bracers we also have to engrave 10% crit chance, same as on the belt. 10% crit chance is what we engrave, and then on the torso we go for 50% crit damage here, and on the boots we have 100% crit damage while full health. This set will give you an idea what it will feel like when you play with a perfect epic set. You can also use this when you are still not having all the items to make my 18 million warrior damage build. As you find more and more good epic pieces, then you can complement the legendary build and transform it into a fully fledged epic build. The best thing you can do is here when you have some perfect epic swords which have warrior damage, damage with swords and critical damage, then you can replace the swords and that will increase your critical damage by 100%. So each sword will give you another 50% critical damage. And that is the easiest way to improve the build. Then when you go for the gear, you will also be able to get more slots on the gear, which you can then use to engrave damage with swords on the head and melee resistance on the other pieces. On the stats page we have now 270% warrior damage, 70% assassin damage and 50% hunter damage. The addition of 155% fire damage gives warrior and hunter a big buff here on top of it, and critical damage will also benefit assassin damage. We have 60% damage bonus with swords. If you engrave another 30% on the Prometheus Seeker, you would have 90% damage with swords, but that's up to you. Then we have 625% critical damage at 100% at full health. Absolutely fantastic for a legendary set. No other legendary set can have that high amount of critical damage together with 100% crit chance. And if you have two melee weapons with 50% crit damage each, you can even push it to 725%. Then we have 155% fire damage and also some health and armor bonuses here. We have not much resistances that can be complemented with additional epic gear that you collect when you try to assemble the 18 million build. For the Transmog I use the Helm of the Underworld combined with the First Civilization set, the breastplate, arms, legs and waist, and that gives me the look like a Star Wars Sith Lord almost, and it is really amazing. I've also combined it with the Blade of Yumminess used as a lightsaber, so when we have fire enabled on the Blade of Yumminess, it will look like a very thin, long, really unique lightsaber look. It's absolutely amazing. For the abilities we will mainly focus on warrior stuff, but due to the hybridness we will also pick some of the hunter and assassin stuff here. We start with Sixth Sense, which gives us 200% hunter damage when being spotted, but it also slows down time not only for hunter but also for warrior and assassin, which is really helpful when being spotted at any kind of playstyle. We don't have to invest any points on Arrow Master because we have fire arrows on our bow anyway. Then we can activate multi-shot, which is really powerful, devastating shot as demonstrated. We go for Archery Master, which fills up our first adrenaline segment and gives us 40% hunter damage. So our whole hunter damage is almost only coming from Archery Master and an all damage perk and the fire damage here in this gear set. One ability you always have to go for when you want to play as only slightly as a hunter is the Overpower Bow Strike, which deals a double amount of damage than the Predator shot. It dealt 4 million damage and killed the mercenary instantly at the beginning of this video. And that's even with very low hunter damage stats. I can't even dream of what it will be in a fully fledged hunter build, so that will be absolutely amazing. Then if you want you can also go for Ghost Arrows of Artemis. These arrows will also pierce shields, walls and everything else. The Might of Artemis is also really powerful now. It deals a lot of damage to your surrounding enemies. You can basically spam Ring of Chaos, Might of Artemis, Ring of Chaos, Might of Artemis, one after another and kill all your enemies around you. In the Warrior branch we go for Charged Heavy Attack, which deals 300% damage. We go for Weapons Master, Gear Master, our passive abilities. Then we can either invest 1 point on Flaming Attacks or 3 points on Flaming Attacks, depends on if you have engraved it on the Prometheus Seeker or not. If you have engraved the fire damage on the Prometheus Seeker permanently, you only go for 1 point here. If not, then invest 3 points so that you can always activate it without cooldown. Then you go for Fire Master, 40% fire damage additionally. Overpower Attacks, the best ability here which will deal the most damage, Furiosa Bloodline, Ring of Chaos and Second Wind. You will also go for Shadow Assassin, which not only gives us 40% assassin damage but also 50% crit damage, and that crit damage applies to any playstyle, so you always have to go for that perk. Then we also go for Rush Assassin, which will be enough to kill any elite enemies in the game except for mercenaries, but that is okay because we have critical assassination and that will deal with our mercenaries just perfectly, even on Nightmare. Don't forget to have Stealth Master, that will increase your out of combat damage, especially overnight. Then for the Masteries we will only invest for crit chance and crit damage on the hunter side. We will max out these perks as much as possible. However, if you don't have as many points than I have, then just go for 12 points or 15 points on the most important ones. But when it comes to crit chance always has to be maxed out. Otherwise you will not have 100% crit chance and not crit every hit you make. Then on the Warrior tab we increase our melee charging speed by quite a bit. Then we go for Warrior damage, which is absolutely important, And you can skip melee charging speed, but warrior damage is important. Overpower is not important. Health, armor, melee resistance, always optional. Fire damage is important. Armor penetration is important. So you can mainly only focus on warrior damage, fire damage and armor penetration if you don't have as many points as I have. All the others can be skipped here. Then on the Assassin tab we have damage when time is slowed down. That is also optional. Assassin damage is optional. Damage with swords is a must-have. Absolutely max this one out as much as possible. Then crit chance, of course, max out. Crit damage, max it out as much as possible. And then the rest is rather optional here. Damage while full health, optional. The adrenaline stuff is optional. And damage with elites and bosses is also rather optional. If you leave out all the optional stuff here, you can make a build that is almost as good with 150 or 200 points only. So that is really amazing. The Masteries mostly give you only minor bonuses. What you have to do is focus on your gear. That's the most important part. And if you can get a couple of epics, then your set will be absolutely amazing. So thank you for those who are still watching, who watched the video until the end. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and thanks for watching.